Brotherly love, the eighth principle of recovery. Most folks like to think of themselves as kind. We are generally kind to people until they give us a reason not to be. But what's so special about that? For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? You have to ask yourself, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Sometimes you have to choose. But first, do you struggle with codependency, chemical addiction of any kind? Do you just want less drama in your life? I think this series is going to be for you. Hello, God bless, and welcome. I'm Kevin Haggerty. You're listening to the Godlogic Project. This is the 8th in a 12-part series on the principles of recovery. The 8th principle being the principle of brotherly love. Please consider yourself or anyone you love while listening to this message. Please receive this and all Godlogic Project messages in the spirit of love and service that they're offered. I know this series forces us to look into some dark places. Please understand this is merely my opinion on the principle of brotherly love and not by any means a definitive expose on principles or brotherly love. I'm just a messenger. To introduce myself to you guys, my name is Kevin and I'm an alcoholic. That does not mean the principles we're going to unpack in this 12-part series only apply to chemical addiction. In fact, in my 30 years experience in the recovery process, as well as years of sponsoring and mentoring folks through the recovery process, I've come to understand these principles can be applied to any debilitating obsession we struggle with, and that leads us into repeated patterns of brokenness. So that does not necessarily mean the next drink or drug. For you, it could very well mean the next dysfunctional relationship, the next bout with binge eating, the next bout with needing the approval of others, or in essence, being addicted to the approval of others. It seems these all amount to a kind of idolatry, putting someone or something above your relationship with your Creator, deriving your self-worth from all the wrong places. You see, I truly believe we're designed to be in relationship with God, our Genesis 2 relationship. When we remove God from our hearts, we leave a God-shaped hole. We try to fill that hole with alcohol and drugs, sex and status, money, food, social media, even our spouses and our children. But nothing ever fits. In my experience, nothing ever will. It's been God we've been lacking the whole time. Stemming from low self-esteem, these types of social addictions can be every bit as hard to stop as our chemical ones. But now, back to the question of brotherly love. In Jesus' message, the Sermon on the Mount, which is Matthew 5, 6, and 7, he challenges us to be kind to people even when they're not kind to us. He says, "For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same?" He demands of us that if our righteousness does not surpass that of the Pharisees, we can expect no reward, no blessing, no relationship. Biblically speaking, this is the new covenant. Just to put things into context for you, Pharisees were near the top of the spiritual food chain in first century Judea, tax collectors near the bottom. Jesus essentially was calling on his followers to raise the bar of how they treated others. Certainly knowing that they would not be able, in their fallen state, to do this perfectly. But perhaps he still wanted them to stretch themselves spiritually and socially. In fact, when asked which of the 10 commandments were most important, Jesus boiled them down to 2. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second, he said, was this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There are no greater commandments than these. That's Mark 12, 30 and 31. So love your neighbor as yourself. Let's be honest, that's a tall order. It was unimaginable 2,000 years ago and almost impossible to do today, at least in a healthy way or without being codependent. Still, regardless of our personal religious beliefs, we have to admit, it would solve a lot of the angst in our lives, and in the world for that matter. But how do we do that? What does that look like in our day-to-day lives? The principle of brotherly love, derived from the 8th step of the 12-step recovery process, has us make a list of all the persons we have harmed and become willing to make amends to them all. That speaks to our ability to forgive, regardless of whether or not they are willing to forgive us. To be kind, even if they're not kind in return. It's the right thing to do, but it's not easy. Pride, for one, stops us, because we instinctually love ourselves more than we love others. It's a type of disproportionate instinct, an emotional self-preservation. So, I'll ask again, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Sometimes we have to choose between the two. I think I could take some of the pressure off, though. You see, we aren't forgiving them for them. We're forgiving them for us. We're not letting them off the hook. We're letting ourselves off the hook. We are trying to be in right relationship with our Creator, to be reasonably happy, to have peace. It's a peace that surpasses all understanding, so don't burden yourself with trying to understand it. In fact, if it's a peace that surpasses all understanding and you understand it, you're probably doing it wrong. Trust yourself. It may not feel like it right now, but you're God's creation too, so have faith. Like I've said in each part of this series, these principles have brought millions back from the gates of insanity and death. It's worked for them, it's working for me. It will work for you too. There are churches and support groups all over the country that are filled with people just like you and me. God works through those people. He reaches out to us through them. They are here to help, and for the most part, they have a servant's heart. And God will, by the way, replace your heart of stone with a heart of flesh. He has for me, and He has for millions of others. Simply put, these principles work when nothing else does. So, if we love God with all our hearts, and we're all created in God's image, then we have to love the people around us too. They're God's creation. They are also made in God's image, and equal to us in every way, even if they sin differently from us, even if they haven't begun a recovery process, and even if they're unkind to us. This is not a competition. The same fallen state that we suffer from, they suffer from. In fact, it's that shared fallen state that led Moses to doubt, David to lust, Judas to betray, and Peter to deny. But a clear distinction needs to be drawn. We're all broken. We all make mistakes. But only some of us are recovering, and it's a process. But during that process, we're not doormats. Just like we don't consider ourselves as being of greater value than our peers, we don't consider ourselves of being less either. Codependency, by the way, is very real. It's more common than you think. Here is why we rely on a good sponsor or mentor again. We can't fix a sick mind with a sick mind. We need help. We're still learning. We're still hurting. And it's too hard to be objective, especially in the beginning. We need someone who's been through this process and been through it successfully. Anyway, what takes personal discipline today will become spiritual muscle memory tomorrow. I hope you're beginning to see how each of these 12 principles overlap. They're all tools in your spiritual tool bag. You'll become skilled at using them at different times and in different situations, but it takes time. Go easy on yourself. If you're diligent, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with your progress. And remember, the long-term goal isn't just being willing to love thy neighbor, but to have that become your first instinct. To recognize, even in their brokenness, everyone has value. Everyone is made in God's image, and everyone is equal in the eyes of God. And there, but for the grace of God, goes you and I. I don't want you to miss the rest of this 12-part series. Next week's principle being the principle of discipline. Please download the Godlogic Project podcast from SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the 9 platforms we're currently available on. You'll be alerted each time new content is uploaded. Share it with a friend. Email me with any questions or your personal testimony at godlogicproject@gmail.com. Let me know if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast. I hope you'll also subscribe to the Godlogic Project on YouTube. It's free. Ring the alert bell while you're there. Visit godlogicproject.com for links to the growing list of social media and podcast platforms that we're available on. If no one's told you they love you today, God loves you. So do I. Receive that. Be blessed, and we'll speak soon. Thank you.